Afternoon, everybody. On behalf of FPSA, we'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar on better data equals better process operations. This is being presented by our technology network, and my name is Christine Radke. I am the director of the networks and special projects for FPSA. Before I pass it on to our moderator, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Well, so this is not going to be like a typical webinar where you're looking at presentation the whole time. It's going to be more of an open dialogue. So at any time during the broadcast, please enter your questions in the question pane, and our assistant moderator will be monitoring those to see what comes in. So feel free, anytime during the broadcast, please type those in. One other thing, or a couple other things, this is being recorded, and you will get a link to the recording along with a certificate of attendance in a follow-up email. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to our moderator today, our chair, Matt Hartman. Matt?
Thank you, Christine, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody, or at least the people out on the West Coast. I'm glad everybody could join us on this continuing series of implementing the industrial Internet of Things. One of the goals we really wanted to accomplish was getting past a lot of the hype associated with it and figuring out how do you actually use it to improve your process, improve results, and at the end of the day, getting an ROI. But we see a lot of hype. Let's try to demystify some of it and ask some good questions and move forward. Christine, do you want to go to the next slide? So a little point of, I guess, information we want to get out there. Coming up at Process Expo, sure hope to see everybody out there. We're going to have the Technology Network. We'll have a happy hour meetup on Tuesday, October 8th at 4 p.m. at booth 2848. We're looking forward to seeing everybody. And then also we're going to have a forum conversation on implementing the industrial Internet of Things, where it's a panelist conversation. We're going to have Keith Wirtz from Blendtec. We're going to have Brent Wassell from Cybertroll. And then we're going to have Ola, who is with us today from Endres Hauser, and then Dan Stroff from Sugar Creek Packing. So we're going to have a really great group of people, and hopefully looking forward to a good turnout. Also coming up, we're going to do another one of our webinars on continuing the industrial Internet of Things. And that's going to be in November, so wait for more details coming forward. And then all of our past webinars are available on the website, FPSA. Just take a look at that and get the audio download. So with that, let's move forward, Christine. So today, we've got Ola Westrom from Endres Hauser, who we're really excited to have with us today. In the past, we focused on picking a problem and trying to get your head around the industrial Internet of Things, where pick a problem that you have to solve. Pick something you can get done in 90 days, have executive engagement to help sponsor you on those kind of engagements, but make sure it's something simple you can get started with. And then the next webinar we talked about security. And part of security is really, first of all, understanding where are you vulnerable. What devices do you have on your network? What's out there that could be a problem, so you can start prioritizing the fixes of those problems. But today we're going to be focusing on something that I kind of consider the boots on the ground problem of implementing industrial Internet of Things. Is getting the data, is where that's where it all starts. And so I'm really excited to have Ola here from Endres Hauser. And he's an industry manager for food and bev, so he's really applicable to what we're trying to accomplish here at FPSA and helping disseminate information regarding implementing the industrial Internet of Things. So Ola, welcome.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So what we're seeing here is that the industrial Internet of Things, Ola, is a big topic, right? A lot of hype, a lot going on with it. So I was hoping maybe you could kind of start the conversation off, and I like Wayne Gretzky. Could you help us understand where is the puck at today, and where is the puck going with the industrial Internet of Things?
Well, using Wayne Gretzky, hopefully the puck goes into the net, obviously, right? But But just putting it in my terms, today I feel everybody's trying to figure out what does the IIoT Industry 4.0 or what does it mean? What does it mean to me? Where do I start? And to your point earlier, you have had a couple of other webinars to try to start address that there. I would say today we're at the point where we're trying to figure it out. Our end users are trying to figure out. As a supplier, we're trying to wrap our heads around it. Plant builders, OEMs, and skid builders and so on, trying to figure out how does that deploy, as you provide a system there. So I'd say where we are today, we're kind of at the blue line. I would say we're in the scoring zone, and as we're moving towards the goals there, we're going to start figuring out where those opportunities are to really deploy it in a productive way, so that people have use for the information that we glean from it there. So I think that's where I'm at. Where we are today, we're still very much at the starting point. For sure, there's been data collection in the past and so on, looking at it there, but it's generally stayed within the control system and the control architecture. Now we're looking at what are the other aspects, other pieces of information that we can glean from the processes that ultimately is going to help us be more productive, or let's say that people in the food processing industry is going to be more productive in their daily work and be able to be more competitive as well.
And I think that's what it's all about, is being more competitive in your environment where you're playing. And I think it's going to differentiate average players from the advanced players. And that's going to result in a few extra points of margin here and a few extra points of margin there by making those subtle changes to your process, getting that sort of data that you need to make really critical process decisions that you might not have any necessarily intelligence on
right.
Why is this a problem.
Yep.
So do you want to go ahead and start your slides there, Ola?
I'll do that, yeah. So that kind of leads into this here. Matt, after you contacted me to participate in this, I happened to come across this. So this is a fairly recent statement from somebody at Oracle, and I thought this was right on the money for this conversation today. As that, I'll just read it out. Business decisions are now driven by key performance data, not historical practices or best guesses. And many times that's where we've been at. People looked at historical data, what is going on. People today, you want to look at real-time information and visibility to help you segment or differentiate what you're doing today. And I would agree with John's statement here that this is going forward. This is what's going to kind of possibly make or break if you're successful or not.
For sure. And if you've ever watched the movie Moneyball, which really I think shows what we're talking about here, where you went from scouts who are looking at players on best guesses or just a gut feel, as opposed to looking at real data to drive a decision of who they wanted to hire for the team. And I think I love that quote, because it's going to be it's the difference, isn't it, to being thriving or barely surviving. That's a great quote.
Yep, I think so too. I think it's right on there, and like I said, on the data-driven information there, the information is there right now. It's just a question about how to use it.
One question that did come in that we can try to address during this is, how do we overcome a potential partnership stalemate at a customer when they're apprehensive about digital solutions that they perceive as invasive to their IT structure, proprietary info or solutions? So that's one of the things that we'll want to address during this.
I think that's a good point, and we have something that in the presentation later on that hits on that. If we're not clear towards the end, we can circle back at it. But yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, there's like I mentioned earlier, people are uncertain about it. It's kind of a new realm to get into. You have the security side of things. You have like, what does this mean to me? How do I get started? And that's kind of what I was looking at going through here today. Is like, where do I get started, and how do I tap into the information I might already have? So with it's a very good question. We'll try to get to it here.
Thanks, Tim, for bringing that question up.
Yep. So where I thought, just looking at here is, like I said, okay, I figured why the maps? Kind of to the point just now, the question that came up, people that are hesitant of getting started on this, where to go. And let's say an analogy I thought of here as I was preparing this, we're all, or most of us, depending on how we date ourselves, are used to paper maps. We needed to go somewhere, we would pull out a paper map and we would try to figure out where to go, and then fingers crossed that the map was correct and that there wasn't too much traffic in our way. So then obviously today we're all connected up through the web, and we're looking at real-time data about construction sites, traffic condition, traffic congestion, whatever it might be going on. And then not only that, but it also helps us reroute. So say, okay, here's a delay. Do you want to go a different route? And I think that's one way we can look at it from a process side as well. It's like if we see an obstacle coming, let's say we see in this case we're going to talk mainly about the instrumentation, kind of a feet on the street, so to speak. If we see that an asset is about to fail or there's some issue with it, can we get ahead of that and start rerouting production or changing or be prepared for it so we don't run into that roadblock and then have no way of backing up? So that's maybe one way to initiate that conversation with customers. Like you're in your daily life, you're already applying and using IIoT or IoT to your benefit. And this is all based on, the way you get this information. I had the ways up here. That's user-based information. So that's other users that are feeding back that information to you, so that you can be proactive about what you're doing. So to me, that's just a way to kind of maybe break the ice, if you will, if you have somebody that is a little bit apprehensive about going this direction.
And I like that metaphor because partly because here in Indianapolis, they've been under a lot of road construction.
Tell me about it.
You don't even want to go to the grocery store without turning Waze on because you're not sure what you're going to run into along the way. And nighttime lane closures, whatever. And I like that because that's a good metaphor for in our plants, that if we have the data to see how long it's going to take us to get from, let's say, batch to batch and compare those batches, that gives us that same kind of information that Waze gives us. Hey, you need to be going this way, not that way.
Right.
So I love that metaphor. And I also wanted to ask you you shared the story as we were preparing for all this about your RV. Could you go ahead and share that story?
Yeah, it was just something that came up, and we talked about it here and say maybe it's a good way to analogy as well. Today, most cars have tire pressure monitors. If you have a newer car today, you're used to it. You're going to have a tire pressure monitor on it. And I have an old RV, pre-2000s, absolutely nothing there. But one of the things you need to keep an eye on is the tire pressure. You don't want to be out on vacation and a tire burst because you've got too low pressure. So I just happened to find for about $50 or so, I could buy a tire pressure monitor. You screw them on to the valve stems and put a little display up on the driver's seat, and I could keep constant, real-time information about the condition of the pressure in my tire. So I thought that's just an easy way that in my personal life, it's like this is in a way IoT. This is kind of what we're looking at here is how do I get that additional information in an easier and real-time way? And the more I was thinking about it, it kind of also addressed a little bit the security issue. This is a one-way communication. I can see what the tire pressure is at any given time, but I can't let the pressure out of the tires. It's not smart enough to let me do that. So there's really no security issue. It's a one-way type of communication for me. It helps me. I don't have to stop the RV and look at it and get my tire gauge out and so on. Always keeping an eye on it. So that kind of like, if you relate to it, newer plants and older plants, if you have a newer plant, it might already come with those tire gauges. If you have an older plant, there might be a way to retrofit things in so that you have that same real-time information.
And what I loved about that story a whole lot, in its simplicity, you identified the problem. You didn't have lots of scope creep associated with solving that problem. You wanted to solve a very specific problem.
Yeah.
It was time bound. You didn't want it to go on forever. You wanted to fix it within obviously for your next vacation.
Yep.
And then metaphorically speaking, you had executive buy-in on the whole decision process to support it.
Sure.
So to me, I look at that and go, in a simple level, you had all the pieces of a IoT engagement kind of situation. So
Yep.
that's why I wanted you to share that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties to, for repetition purposes here, to me it ties to keeping it simple, and it also ties to understand what the business need is. Don't get hung up on the technology side. For me, checking the tire pressure or not getting a flat or not blowing a tire, that was my business need, if you will. So I only got the piece of information that was relevant to that. I didn't try to do a whole lot of other things related to it. So that's kind of the overlaying story here, is like, make sure that the information you glean from whatever you're looking at is relevant to the stakeholders and that somebody will be looking at it. Because if it's not going to be used, it's just a waste of time, money, and resources, you name it.
And I think that's a really important point, and I think it's important to keep going over it, because in a previous life as a controls engineer, we were tasked with creating all sorts of data associated with the plant, and we wrote so much PLC code and HMI code and data collection code to accumulate all this data. But what we didn't do was look at the stakeholders of who was going to be using that data.
Mm-hmm.
So the way the data was created was never created in such a way to become usable.
Right.
So we collected a lot of unusable data with no context around it, and so all that effort was lost. Where if you look at your RV analogy, you had a very specific problem you were trying to solve. You collected a very specific data, and it was secure and safe because nobody's going to, you can't deflate your tires with it.
Right. So that's yeah, I mean, it might sound simplistic, but I think that's one of the easiest ways to approach it, and without getting too far into the weeds. Just make sure you understand who's going to be using the information and for what business purposes it's going to be used.
Right, exactly. I love it.
Yep.
All right, do you want to go to the next slide?
Yep, can do that. So what the thought was here, part of our, let's say, investigation we did, well, within the company, obviously we keep an eye on what's going on, and being an instrumentation manufacturer globally, we have a pretty good handle of what the install base is. And we've looked at that. There's about, globally, not just in food and beverage industry, but across all industries, there's about 450 million instruments that are currently in operations, measuring for whatever reason, whatever parameter it might be, but they're measuring something. And as we looked at that, we came to the conclusion close to 80% of those are already digital, meaning that since well over 20 years, 25 years probably, most instruments, or a lot of instruments, are HART capable, meaning that they're 4 to 20 milliamp with a superimposed digital signal, the HART protocol. So that's the majority of them. And then you also have other digital buses out there, which are Profibus, Foundation Field Bus, Modbus, IO-Link has started gaining some traction here recently, and there's other digital protocols as well. So a lot of the infrastructure out there already is digital. It is enabled and capable of providing more information. The trouble with it, what we found was, in our estimate, 97% of that information is never touched. It might be used, but at one time somebody hooks up a handle terminal to it and does a initial setup and configuration. Once that point-to-point handheld is disconnected, it's never used, never looked at again. And that's a huge resource that's just untapped out there. And so when we started looking at that, okay, you have, you know, existing facilities with legacy systems and so on. How do I get access to that? And then, of course, you also have, you know, the opportunity when you build something brand new to start incorporating and start using that additional digital information that resides in these devices. And this is not really just restricted to instrumentation. There you start getting more and more information clearly out of drives and pumps and valves and other pieces of equipment as well, you know, that have digital capabilities to tell you or inform you about their status or health or whatever additional information it might be. So that's to me, that's a great starting point and a great opportunity to start looking at how do I get this information without spending a whole lot of additional money or resources to it. That's why I have the title on this slide here, you know, use what you have. There's rarely any need to spend a whole lot of more money or let's say effort on getting the data.
And I think what was really neat about this slide, first of all, there's several points that I thought was just very impressive of Endress Hausers, that there's 450 million instruments out there, yeah, and 97% of that data is going unused. And what I really felt was neat about what Endress Hauser is saying is not going down the road of just selling more sensors, but right, promoting, hey, you've got a lot of the technology in the plant already. You don't have to spend a lot. Use what you got. And I think that's just a very honorable position to take to help people get more value of the asset that they already have. And I think it creates a lot more long-term value for Endress Hauser by doing that. But what I see,
the right thing, you know.
But what I see here is it's interesting. Is I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I look at this and go, oh my gosh, where do I start? You know, I have all these sensors in my plant. You know, it kind of gets, you know, a confused person doesn't do anything. And right, so where, I guess, as E&H's perspective, whenever you walk into a plant and people start asking about engagements and that kind of thing for IoT, where do you start with that conversation? What questions do you start to ask them?
It kind of comes back to the statement I made earlier, understanding what the stakeholders are looking for. Depending on generally where we end up starting is on the maintenance side, to say, okay, because the instruments in particular have a lot of additional diagnostic information and or secondary variables that you can take advantage of. So many times we start with the maintenance side to say, okay, how can you leverage this for predictive maintenance purposes? So that's one conversation to have. Then the other one gets into more the production. So that could be in quality management or operational side. So if I take an example here on this particular slide, we show some level sensors and some pressure sensor and a Coriolis mass flow meter. If you take a Coriolis meter as an example, many times all you're getting out of that, what it's hooked up to, was the mass flow rate. That's all we want to know. We want to know how many pounds of product we're flowing through here. So that's how it's set up for the control system. In that Coriolis meter, you also have a density function, you have a temperature function, you have advanced diagnostics in there that tells you if there are air bubbles or entrained air in the product, if you start getting buildup in the line, and all kinds of other pieces of information that may or may not be relevant to what you're trying to do there. And so that's why I came back. It's like, okay, say, okay, we know we need to increase productivity or efficiency in this line. what are the pieces of instrumentation existing, or we may need to add, or controls that then can be looked at. It's like, what can we dig deeper into that? What else is that capable of providing us? And just kind of start that as an exploratory side to find out what's going on there. And then
I heard something interesting, which was, all along we've been talking about picking a problem, right?
Yeah.
And try to solve that problem. And maybe in certain situations, like in your case with an installed base, maybe you have to kind of work out a little bit differently and go, gosh, we have this sensor. Mm-hmm. It can do all this stuff. Yeah. Huh. Wow, that's really neat. I wonder if we could solve this particular downtime issue or this entrained air issue, because now we're looking at each individual sensor to utilize what we have. So I think that's a curious way, a curious dynamic of looking at that installed base of, gosh, what can I solve?
Right, exactly. What are we interested about? Give you an example. Something that came up a couple of weeks ago. One of our customers wanted to put in something for a phase separation. So they contacted us for some additional connectivity sensors. And as we walked into the plant, we looked at it, where they want to install it, and we happened to look up and say, well, you already have a magnetic flow meter sitting, in the same line, maybe 10 feet from where you want to put this connectivity sensor. Do you know that this magnetic flow meter also have a conductivity output? You might be able to use that for your phase separation. If it is, fast enough and accurate enough what you need to do. If it's not, then yes, we can still go down the line or just go down the path of adding a piece of instrument. But there is that additional information that you might be able to get. And if you can pull it out, use it for control purposes, that's one thing. Many times we see people are looking at the IoT separate from the controls, though. So I don't want to muddy the water too much there. You clearly have the additional information that is residing in the instruments that are possibly used for control purposes. But I think where the IIoT side really shines is to get information that is not used for control purposes, but are used for other purposes. Maybe you wanted to log the totalizer separately from what the controls is doing. Maybe somebody let's say in a logistics or accounting role need to see how many pounds of product did we move through in total during the day or during the week or month or so. That may not be collected today, but that's from an IIoT solution. You might be able to extract that up, bring it up into a cloud, and somebody in accounting is looking for that information. It's not necessarily somebody in production that would care about that.
Right.
Or, I'm not saying not care, but it may not be such a high priority for them.
Exactly.
I think that rolls into another question that came through is how do you determine what data to gather when you go in and look at a plant with somebody?
I don't say that, but I look for anything in particular. It's generally in conversation with the people and say, okay, what are the operational issues that they run into? What are the bottlenecks? What are the let's say, what are things that cause downtime for them? What are discrepancies? Today we talk a lot about mass balance, trying to figure out, throughput of a facility. I don't want to say that there is one real answer to that. That comes out of a conversation with depending on what group you're talking to. Like I mentioned earlier, if it's maintenance, it's often trying to figure out how can I be in going from maybe the initiative to go from plant maintenance to predictive maintenance. How help me go in that path? What are the things what are tools available to me today to go from this state to this state? So I would say there's not one question, not one answer to anything like that. It's progressive, and it's understanding what the current state is and what the desired state is. And as from our side as a supplier, clearly we can bring our knowledge to that, and we have very qualified people in the industry from an engineering or integrators and OEMs that bring their skill set to it as well. So I would say in many cases it's a joint effort to figure out what's the best path from A to B here.
That's a great question. I think we're all struggling with that.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's kind of it's a journey. You just need to see where you're at and where you want to go and what are the possibilities. And usually through conversation and dialogue, you arrive at what's possible and what we can or cannot do, and just arriving at it that way. Personally, I don't know if there's any better way. I'm all ears. I'm looking to learn as well. If there's different ways.
What I've seen that was helpful is the idea of running lots of experiments. Mm-hmm. And take that one sensor that had some of the data, try it, see what kind of data you can get, run some experiments with it, and see if it moves the needle for you. Maybe you do need more, better, faster data later on, but do a quick experiment, fail fast, learn from it, and rinse and repeat kind of scenario is how I have seen a lot of success work. Of just not, again, it's a journey, right? I love that analogy as well, that there is no end game to it, because there's always going to be some other problem to solve, something else to optimize, something else to get more efficient. So go ahead to the next slide then, Ola.
Yep, can do that. So the next question is usually, it's like, okay, so we already have from the last slide here is, all right, so we already have our control system. We have a PLC, we have a controller, we have a DCS, or whatever it is. It's already set. We don't want to touch it. How do I go about it now? And for sure, if you already have a digital network, an Ethernet IP network and so on, that generally makes it a little bit easier for you to extract that additional information, because once you're on a full digital platform, like a Profinet, Ethernet IP, or other digital platforms, you usually can start pulling that information a little bit easier. But let's say you're on a more traditional platform where you're using 420 connectivity there, where we see the possibility is to start adding what kind of in the industry is called an edge device, so that you're not actually disrupting the control architecture. You're just pulling let's say the diagnostic or secondary variables off of the devices, send it up into the cloud, and then from the cloud you decide, what am I going to use this information for? Who does it need to go to? Who is this information valid for? And how are they going to act on it if there is something that is outside of the norm? So that's kind of where the IoT differs a little bit, or yeah, I didn't say differs, but adds the dynamic to it, that you can either pull the information through the control system if you're set up that way. If you're not, and you start being concerned about, let's say, that the question earlier about security, by using edge devices that are generally a one-way. They can be bi-directional, but many times we set them up as a one-way communication. Then you're pulling the information out of there, but you're not creating a risk that something will come in from the outside and cause any issues, changing parameters or doing anything. Coming back to my tire pressure sensor there, I can see the data, but nobody can do something to my tires.
Right. I think the edge device term is kind of a new expression in the lexicon of the world here. Would you consider, like my thermostat that's on connected to my Wi-Fi, which I can access through my phone? Would you consider that an edge device?
Yeah, I guess it would be. So edge device is not necessarily a new term. I think it's being applied in this way is a little bit new, because an edge device traditionally is essentially a router or a firewall that allows you to connect two networks one network to another one. That's kind of the traditional term for an edge device. So you would have, yeah, let's say your router in your house, that would be an edge device, allowing you to connect your home network to the World Wide Web.
Got it.
That is being extended a little bit more now, I would say loosely. It's just the term that is being used. So an edge device could be that one little wireless connector that sits on one pressure transmitter. That could be an edge device, or it could be a device that is collecting information from a whole network and then sending it up to the cloud. So the definition has broadened a little bit recently here.
Got it. Okay, excellent. Do you see, I mean, you know, I like getting back to what you were talking about with security, because everybody's worried about security. And it's I was talking to a parent where my daughter goes to gymnastics at, and he was telling me that one of his plants was hacked and created a lot of turmoil for him. And so I find that really curious. I mean, whenever you add these devices, how do you make sure it's secure?
Well, there's different ways to ensure that. Obviously, on one way you can have it on an internal server, so it doesn't ever get outside. So I mean that's one way of doing it. Of course, there's still no 100% guarantee on that. I mean, we see banks and retailers and others that are being hacked into over the years here. So even if it's on an internal server, there's no guarantee. Obviously, it probably helps to protect it a little bit. But the other way is also today, when you're using or you're going into a cloud, there are certification programs out there. There are third parties essentially looking at, you know, how do you secure the information that you in the cloud that you use. So let's say just speaking from Endress & Hauser. So from Endress & Hauser side, the information that we send up through our edge devices into our applications, our apps, our mobile apps, that resides, we own it, but it actually resides on an Amazon-based cloud. So we're leveraging the security that Amazon is applying on their cloud infrastructure, and we're connecting into that and using some of that space. So that allows us to have that what we call a 4-star certification to be able to keep that secure. So people are looking at that. If you're looking to partner with somebody, you should go through that, you know, as due diligence to make sure that the partner you're working with, the cloud environments that they provide or they use, has gone through this kind of certification to at least have, you know, a good comfort level that it's secure.
Right.
That it's not a server in somebody's basement that you're using.
Right. And I think something people don't quite understand is having a server locally in, let's say, in your brick and mortar in your actual business versus, let's say, in Amazon. There are risks either way.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that you're moving the risk from one place to the other. And I like what you talked about with using Amazon. You use the professionals who are doing this every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it again, coming back to your own personal life, I mean, most of us do online banking today. I mean, that sits on a cloud. I mean, you essentially have all your money in a cloud somewhere, right? So think about that one when you drive home.
Very good. Do you want to move on to the next slide?
All right. So coming back to, let's say, more live, practical examples. I mentioned earlier maintenance, how they are one of our core users of this information, where we often engaged on the IoT space, is all the information that you can glean from an instrument today. So you have clearly the first little box I show here is measure or gleaning information from the primary, possibly secondary variable. I mentioned earlier, maybe you're not even looking at a totalized value or aggregate value or something like that. Maybe somebody in logistics or accounting need that information, but it's not part of the not part of the control architecture, well, through an edge device, you might be able to pull that out. So then more people can have access to this information. What I mentioned earlier is like, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people that need to see this? You can go way outside of your normal realm, if you will. You know, who needs to see that information? Who knows? Maybe the general manager of a company will want to see what's going on somewhere. Clearly, he's not going to be looking into through the control system. So this gives it a way or a method to do this. The next one is the diagnostics, to get a standardized diagnostics view to say, okay, are we running good? Or are we something that needs to be checked in the near future? Or is there a serious failure? Yeah, you got to shut down right now. Don't produce any more product because there's no guarantee that it's going to meet with the specifications. We get that, you know, as an instrument manufacturer, we get instrumentation sent into us for repair, and we can see, well, this probably hasn't been working right for quite a while. It finally died, but before that, it probably was off quite a bit. So to be able to get this information, the screen in the upper left corner here, where you see you have 23 devices working just fine, one has failed, and all the other ones are still okay as well. So have a kind of a scoreboard, if you will, or a
dashboard.
A dashboard to get a quick view and say, okay, everything is working just fine. What's going on with this one device here? Then go and address that either before it becomes an issue, or in this case here, if it's totally failed, you may have, if it's a critical control device, you may need to make sure you shut down and don't run to have that's information that is in those 97% of the instruments that are out there, but nobody's looking at. Usually it fails, and then an operator contacts maintenance and say, hey, this don't seem to be running right, or you put a lot of product in containers, quality later on finds out that there's something wrong. Well, if you had this dashboard, you might have been able to catch that issue a week ago and addressed it before it went to a total failure. So that's something that you can quite easily extract from the devices. And then I think you mentioned earlier, you know, visualize historical data, you know, related to various things, not just the primary variable, but also secondary variables to help, you know, look at that from an overall process diagnostics. The other screen got here is sent messages to your mobile device. So if you're a maintenance technician, instead of being in the shop the whole time, you can get an email or a text message and say, hey, you need to go fix this right now. There's something going on here.
Right.
So you can use that. And we started, maybe not so relevant to most food plants, is geotagging. Maybe more relevant for remote locations, but we've done it in factories as well, where you essentially say, this is the geotag, this is the floor we're at. So in the case here, you know, technician gets the text message, here's the tag number, you need to go fix it, and here's the geotag, so he can go straight to it without having to look for it. I mean, you can kind of get within, you know, a few feet of an instrument or an asset.
And what I see happening here is similar to what I see happening like on my Garmin watch, of taking the raw data, let's say miles, let's talk about maybe heart rates, the amount of inclines and declines, and taking all that and contextualizing it into maybe a VO2 max, your cardiovascular fitness level, where I couldn't take all those individual pieces of numbers and turn it into something actionable and correlatable. That's what I see starting to happen, and that's what I see creating value as opposed to the discrete numbers. What giving me like the dashboard, giving something I can do, create value with and create action with. Yep.
You're right on it there, and that's kind of the same thing here. You're just again, it comes down to who needs to see it, when do I need to see it, and what's relevant to that person.
Excellent. Do you want to go to our next slide?
Yep, going to wrap it up here. So that first one there was an example made more from a maintenance perspective. So here we Matthew and I, we talked about, you know, from a process side. I mean, we could have picked any process really. I just happened to have this graphic here that showed, you know, a boiler and a boiler efficiency. Many times boilers come as a package, especially in the food plant. They might come as a package. It's kind of their own little world, if you will. Has its own control system, and it says, you know, how much steam do you need?
Right. It's an island of automation at the end of the day, what you usually buy.
Right. Right. So here it's been an example where potentially adding a couple of either wired or wireless edge devices to this, start looking at, you know, how much natural gas is going on, how much steam am I really producing, what pressure is the steam that I'm producing, and start collecting that to get more of the efficiency of a boiler. Newer boilers, clearly, most of them are going to have that information. But if you have an older boiler system, this would be a viable way to do it. And like I said, this may not be okay. I picked the boiler, but it could be a chillers, it could be a filtration system, it could be a CIP system, it could be whatever process, it could be a blending process, whatever you're looking at, where you're pulling additional information from the instruments that is relevant to whatever you're looking at there. So in the case here, you know, steam and boiler efficiency, a flow meter might just give you how many what the amount of gas is going in. Many flow meters today have built-in flow computers that can tell you actually what the energy value is going to the boiler. So then you pull that out of there. It's not necessary for a controls perspective, but from an accounting or efficiency perspective, you certainly would want to know it.
What I really liked about this, whenever we first started looking at it together, Ola, was it took me back actually to years ago at a plant I was working in doing some retrofit work on some equipment. And we were there on the weekend. And as we were there working on it and getting things up and running, and there was no production at all. This particular plant had 4 large air compressors. And while we were in this plant working, it came to kind of some of the maintenance people who usually weren't there on the weekends or during a total dark shutdown period. It came to their conclusion that one compressor was running continuously out of 4, and there was no manufacturing going on in the plant.
Yep.
It took one compressor to supply all the leaks in the plant.
Right. So that would have been a great opportunity to put some little edge device on either the compressor itself or maybe a pressure sensor, a flow sensor, whatever it might be, and send that information off to whoever was responsible for the utilities and say, hey, your compressor is running here.
Right.
Yeah. So again, starting simple, you know, in your case there, it's okay. Who needs to know? The utility manager needs to know. When does he need to know? When the compressor starts running, and nobody else really needed to be aware of that, right?
Right. Exactly. And so those are those kind of applications. Getting back to your tire pressure on your RV, kind of very specific applications to solve.
Right.
So I guess as we wrap this up, Ola, is there any key takeaways, you know, action items that the audience could take away and start utilizing, you know, in the next 20 minutes almost, that they to get value out of this time today?
Well, I think I've reiterated it several times during this 45 minutes or so, 50 minutes. You have said it here, start small, keep it simple, and make sure that the right stakeholders are involved from the beginning. Focus on the business case, and then figure out the technology that is going to get you there. I think those are the 2 things that I think is the key areas there. It's not all that hard once you start digging into it. Many times the instrumentation or other assets are already going to be there. Use what you have. Don't complicate it. I think that's where we're going to be going at. I mean, if you want to start in the next 20 minutes, I mean, a lot of these, let's say, to get from a technology side, just to get access to it, many suppliers are already offering these kind of edge devices or the digital protocols to get up there, or of course the information to get there. Some of it is probably, I wouldn't be surprised, I haven't looked, you can probably go to Amazon as well and get access to some of these devices to start connecting into to your existing architecture as well. And if you're building something new, I would say if you're a plant builder, skid builder, OEM, just have a conversation with your customers and see what are they looking for. You know, that would help you differentiate your piece of machinery or your piece of equipment. What are they looking to do? Why are they buying your machine instead of somebody else? What is that couple of extra pieces of information that you can give them that they hadn't even thought of before, that, yeah, that's going to help us.
Wow, that's some solid advice. I think that people can take away and use it quickly. So thanks, Ola. Tim, is there any other questions out there that we need to address?
No, I was going to ask if there was any other ones. If you want to get them in quickly, I can get them addressed right now.
All right, so I guess we could probably go ahead and start closing this down. Christine, did you want to go ahead and launch the poll? And Ola, thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and
please
close
complete the poll.
Yeah.
And
looks like it was good information.
all right.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the poll, and look forward to seeing everybody in Chicago.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, bye now.